So when we're looking at TCP, we'll see from the header that there's a lot of information maintained in the header. And the reason why is because this information is necessary for that connection-oriented aspect. We have our source and destination port, which UDP has as well, because the source and destination port are referring to the application-specific functions and services that are being utilized here. So for example, the source port is typically from a client going to be some type of ephemeral port in the upper range of port numbers. So let's say we're using 65,000 for this particular communication. Well, the destination port could be port 23, could be port 22. What is the most common port that is used to access resources on the internet? Well, port 80 if it's unsecure communication, and port 443 if it's secure communication. So there's our source and destination port. However, in order to have that reliable delivery of information, that information has to be sequenced so we can keep track of it, and it also has to be acknowledged. So that way there we know the receiver has received that information, it acknowledged that it received the information, and then we can continue transmitting information as well. However, something that TCP has that UDP doesn't have is a window size. And the window size gives TCP the ability to adjust dynamically on the fly to the changing conditions of our network. So for example, if you are sending a certain amount of data, well, the window size can be adjusted to either send more or less. So that's a very important concept because it gives us the ability to do what is known as flow control. So if all of a sudden there's a lot of drops, meaning that our TCP segments aren't getting through to the end, they're going unacknowledged, or a destination station informs us that, hey, whoa, that's just way too much for me, then we can adjust our window size. And you'll notice here that the window size is 16-bit. So 2 to the power of 16 is 65,536. So our values are from 0 to 65,535. So the maximum window size is 65,535. That's what it is. And that was okay back in the day. Nowadays, with 10 gig links and 100 gig links, we could theoretically transmit more data than 65,535 before we have to receive an acknowledgement, before anything might go wrong or get congested. So we have the ability to window scale nowadays, whereby we can go higher than the 65,535 mark. But let's compare right now this header. Take a mental snapshot of this header. And let's analyze now UDP. Whoa. You see the difference? If you didn't see the difference, let's take a look at that again. TCP, UDP. It's really easy to spot the difference. Remember that UDP is a connectionless protocol. It provides best effort delivery. It has no data recovery features. So do we need all that additional information in the header, like sequencing and acknowledgements and window size or scaling? No, we just need our source and destination port. And then the information that tells us how big the header is and is the header still in check during transmission and reception. So it's very, very lightweight. Very, very lightweight. However, it has the ability to starve out other protocols. There is no windowing option, as we said. So with no windowing option means there's no flow control mechanisms. So as a result, what does UDP do? It just simply transmits as much as it can. It's high volume traffic streams that are being established here. What can that do to the end host? Well, it can starve out those end hosts. Starve out what? Starve out their resources. That end host may not be able to handle that high volume traffic that's being sent to it or that it has to respond to. In addition to that, these high volume traffic streams can starve out the available bandwidth across the path as well. So if you have environments that have UDP in it and TCP, which is relatively normal nowadays, it is quite possible that UDP could starve out TCP, Because what's TCP going to do? It's going to adjust on the fly to the ever-changing needs of the environment. So if traffic's getting dropped, TCP has the ability to adjust, send a little bit more information to prevent congestion from occurring, but UDP has none of that. It's a lightweight protocol. It doesn't have a lot of overhead, and we saw that it's used for voice and video, but it can definitely starve out other traffic flows in the network. So UDP has very, very little latency over TCP. Why? Because with UDP, there's no three-way handshake. There's no acknowledgments. We don't have to wait for any of that information. We don't have to establish a session where TCP has that. So with this reduced latency, we can now understand why we choose UDP for voice and video streams, and why we choose TCP for email, file sharing, downloading, accessing the web, and so on and so forth. If you're still not sure why, let me give you an example. You want to access a Word doc in your network. So you access that Word doc. Do you want the Word doc to open up and display information if all of the information is not there? Do you want that to happen? And the answer to that should be no. No, you want to make sure that all the characters, all the lines, all the paragraphs, all the images, all the pages are there in that Word doc when you're looking at it. So it's important that TCP is used in that case to retrieve that document, so that way there it is complete, it's whole. If any of the pieces were missing, TCP would have would have gone out, grabbed those missing pieces, and made sure that the entire data segment was there. All the information was there for you. So that's true with email, file sharing, downloading, all of that. Whereas with a voice or video stream, let's say you're talking on the phone. As you're talking on the phone, if part of that conversation is missing, do you want that voice conversation to stop? Do you want dead air? You're waiting, you're listening to your friend talk, and all of a sudden there's dead air. And then they start talking again, and then there's dead air. And then they start talking. You don't want that. You don't want that. Why was the dead air there? Well, if you're using TCP, then what is happening with that dead air spot is that TCP is trying to grab that missing information to make sure that the conversation is perfect. But it kind of ruins the conversation now, doesn't it? It makes it very difficult to have a conversation. So UDP, on the other hand, just here's the information, here it comes, here it keeps coming. And so you're listening, you're talking, everything's going perfectly well with that voice stream. Same thing with video. Do you want to be watching a video and all of a sudden it stops? I'm pretty sure you've watched a video that has stopped. You're like, no, oh, come on. And you're waiting. Well, in that case, it was buffering. You were getting content from a server, and it was okay. But what about video streaming and voice streaming all together? A real-time conversation with voice and video. Do we want all of a sudden that to stop and wait to come up? No, it's okay if things get a little blurry, a little pixelated. It's okay if something's missing. We can fill in the gaps as humans. So UDP, best effort, voice and video streaming, where TCP, we're using it for our email, file sharing, downloading, where it's imperative that we have complete, accurate, whole information and data as we're looking at our products.